returned from Qinghe. Rather than making Wei Wuxian copy the Lan clan rules again at the library pavilion, he instead roundly denounced him in front of everyone. After the references to the classics were trimmed out, what remained of the elder Lan's speech was roughly the following. He had never seen anyone so utterly shameless. Leave, quickly. The further away, the better. Don't get close to the other students. Especially don't tarnish his favorite pupil, Lan Wangji, ever again. While Lan Qiren was castigating him, Wei Wuxian listened with a smiling, merry face and wasn't the least bit embarrassed or angry. When the old man left, Wei Wuxian sat down and said to Zhang Chang, "Isn't he shutting the stable door after the horse has bolted by asking me to leave now? I've already done the tarnishing. It's too late." The aquatic abyss near Sai town brought tremendous trouble to the Gusu Lan clan. There was no way to eradicate it, and neither could the Lan clan behave like the winds and drive it off someplace else. As the chief of the Lan clan had been in isolation for many years, Lan Qiren had to exert the mental and physical effort to deal with the problem in his stead. Consequently, the lectures grew shorter and shorter, and Wei Wuxian spent more and more time strolling around the mountains with the others. Today, he was surrounded by 7 or 8 young cultivators again, and they were all headed out. As they passed by the Lan clan's library, Wei Wuxian glanced up through the magnolia branches and could just see Lan Wangji sitting near the window, alone. "Is he watching us?" Niu Huisang said, puzzled. "But that's not right. We weren't being rowdy just now. Why is his expression still like that?" "He's probably thinking about how to catch us doing something wrong," Wei Wuxian replied. "Incorrect," Zhang Chang said. "Not us. You. I only saw him staring at you." "Hey, just wait. Watch me take care of him when we come back," Wei Wuxian said. "I thought you disliked how boring he was." "What? How he's no fun? Then why don't you stop provoking him? It's like pulling on a tiger's whiskers or breaking ground above Tai Sui's head. You're courting disaster," Zhang Chang replied. "Wrong," Wei Wuxian said. "This is fun exactly because an actual living person has managed to be as boring as him." They only returned to the cloud recesses as it neared noon. Lan Wangji was sitting upright beside a table, tidying the stack of papers he had finished writing, when he suddenly heard the window frame lightly creak. Looking upward, he saw someone enter the room through the window. Wei Wuxian had climbed up the magnolia tree outside of the library pavilion. Radiating joy, he said, "Lan Chan, I'm back. How have you been these few days that I haven't had to come here and copy books? Do you miss me?" Resembling a monk entering meditation who saw the world and saw nothing, Lan Wangji seemed somewhat numb as he continued to organize a small mountain of books. Intentionally misinterpreting his silence, Wei Wuxian said, "Even if you don't say it, I know. You must miss me, or else why would you have been watching me through the window?" Immediately, Lan Wangji stared at him, his gaze full of silent denunciation. Wei Wuxian sat on the windowsill and said, "Look at yourself. You took the bait after only a couple of sentences. You lose your cool too quickly. It's way too easy to provoke you." "Leave," Lan Wangji said. "What are you going to do? Defenestrate me if I don't?" Peering at Lan Wangji's face, Wei Wuxian suspected that if he said another word, Lan Wangji would abandon his remaining self-control and murder him by nailing him to the windowsill. Hastily, he said, "Hey, can't you be less scary? I'm here to give you a present and apologize for my wrongdoings." Without even considering the offer, Lan Wangji refused. "I do not want it." "You really don't?" Wei Wuxian asked. He saw a guarded note in Lan Wangji's gaze. As though he was performing a magic trick, he pulled 2 bunnies from the chest area of his robes. He held the 2 chubby, perfectly round snowballs by the ears. The snowballs were still kicking around wildly when Wei Wuxian placed them before Lan Wangji's eyes. Your mountain is strange, he said. There aren't any pheasants, but there's lots of wild bunnies who aren't even afraid of people. So how about it? Aren't they fat little things? Don't you want them? Lan Wangji looked at him with an aloof expression. Okay then, if you don't want them, I'll give them to someone else. It just so happens that we haven't eaten anything good in the past few days. Stop, Lan Wangji said after hearing this last sentence. Wei Wuxian raised his hands. I wasn't leaving. Who are you giving them to? Lan Wangji asked. Whoever's good at cooking rabbit meat, Wei Wuxian said. Killing is prohibited inside the cloud recesses, Lan Wangji said. The 3rd rule on the wall of discipline says exactly this. No problem, Wei Wuxian replied. I'll go down the mountain and kill them outside the boundary lines. Once I'm done, I'll take them back and have them roasted. In any case, you don't want them, so why do you care so much what happens to them? Lan Wangji paused between each word. Give them to me. Wei Wuxian sat on the windowsill, laughing. So you want them now? Look at yourself. You're always like this. The 2 bunnies were fat and round, like fluffy balls of snow. One had eyes like dead fish and lay still on the ground, moving only once in a long while. When it was time to eat, it chewed its leaves slowly and calmly with its small, pink mouth. The other, however, seemed to have eaten a pill, which turned it part fighting cricket. It hopped and bounded without ceasing, everywhere, for a quarter of an hour. It climbed atop its companion and groped, struck, and rolled around on top of the other rabbit, wriggling and bouncing endlessly. Wei Wuxian tossed the 2 some leaves that he had picked up somewhere. Suddenly he said, Lan Chan, Lan Chan. The hyperactive rabbit had stepped in Lan Wangji's inkstone and left a black, inky footprint on top of the desk. Lan Wangji was at a loss. He picked up a piece of paper and gravely contemplated the way to wipe it off. He had wanted to ignore Wei Wuxian, but after hearing the urgency in his voice, he thought something had happened. What is it? He asked. Look at them lying on top of each other. Are they? They're both male, Lan Wangji said. Male? That's odd. Wei Wuxian grabbed their ears and lifted them up to confirm. They really are both male. Well, if they are male, they're male. I wasn't finished with what I was saying earlier. Why are you acting so high-strung? What were you thinking of? After all, I was the one who caught them, and I didn't notice whether they were male or female. But you even looked at their... Lan Wangji finally threw him out the library and sent him hurtling toward the ground. Wei Wuxian laughed maniacally all the way down. A crash sounded as Lan Wangji slammed the window shut and threw himself down by his desk. He surveyed the chaos of paper and inky footprints covering the floor, as well as the 2 white bunnies which rolled about with leaves in their mouths. He closed his eyes and covered his ears. Even the trembling, rustling branches of the magnolia tree had been shut outside the window. But no matter how Lan Wangji tried, he couldn't shut out the sound of Wei Wuxian's lively, unbridled laughter. Over the course of the lectures, Wei Wuxian's seat had changed 3 times. Originally, he sat with Zhang Cheng, but Zhang Cheng behaved studiously and chose to sit in the front row in order to improve the Yunmeng Zhang clan's image in the eyes of the other clan. However, this location was too conspicuous and made it difficult for Wei Wuxian to goof off. So he abandoned Zhangchang and started sitting behind Lan Wangji. When Lan Qiren was lecturing, Lan Wangji sat so straight he blocked Lan Qiren's gaze like an iron wall. This arrangement allowed Wei Wuxian to sleep, doodle, or get up to any trouble he wanted, and other than the occasions where Lan Wangji's hand would suddenly shoot into the air and seize a note Wei Wuxian had tossed at someone, the Lan disciple was a feng shui treasure. However, Lan Qiren eventually cottoned on to Wei Wuxian's strategy and forced him to swap places with his favorite pupil. From that point onward, if Wei Wuxian's posture was even a tiny bit short of proper, he could feel a sharp, ice-cold gaze penetrating his back, and he could see Lan Qiren's evil glowering in front of him too. Watched by the elder and the younger Lans at all times, he was miserable. But after the case of the pornographic book and the case of the two rabbits, Lan Qiren's opinion that Wei Wuxian was like a vat of pitch-black ink became set in stone. The old man was terrified that his favorite pupil would be stained by the troublemaker's proximity. Thus, he made Wei Wuxian return to his old spot, and sure enough, half a month passed relatively peacefully and without incident. Inside the cloud recesses, there was a long wall with a carved, patterned window situated every 7 steps. The image in each was different. A cultivator playing a guqin on a high mountain, or soaring on their sword, or beheading a monster. As explained by Lan Qiren, every window on the wall represented the lifetime achievements of a Gusu Lan ancestor. The oldest among them, and the most famous, depicted the 4 seasons of the life of the clan's founder, Lan An. This founder was from a monastic background and had grown up to the chanting of Buddhist monks. He was intelligent and capable, and at a very young age became an eminent monk himself, renowned far and wide. But when he reached the age of majority, he took the name Lan from the word Chia Lan as his surname and left his monastic order to become a musician. While on his journey, he sought his fated cultivation companion, and he finally met his companion in Gusu. With their paths now bound together, the pair built the foundation of the Lan clan. After his companion's time in this world had ended, he returned to the temple again and concluded the remainder of his life. The 4 windows divided his life into exactly these 4 seasons: life at the temple, life as a musician, life with his companion, and finally his return to the solitary life of a monk. They had finally learned something interesting after so many days at the cloud recesses, despite Lan Qiren's dull recitation of dry chronology. Wei Wuxian had at last managed to listen to one of his lectures. After class was over, he smiled and said, "So it turns out that the father of the Lan clan was a monk. No wonder." He entered the world of mortals in order to meet a single person, and when that person left this world, he left it as well, leaving nothing behind. But if this was Lan clan's founder, how did they wind up producing such unromantic descendants? No one had suspected such an old-fashioned, renowned clan of having a founder like Lan An, and one by one they began to discuss it. After much back and forth, the topic took a turn toward cultivation companions. They began chattering about the kind of cultivation companion they dreamed of, and assessing each famous clan's cultivators. At this time, someone said, "Brothers Sichuan, who do you like the best?" As soon as Wei Wuxian and Zhangchang heard these words, their gazes simultaneously found the young disciple in the classroom's front row. The boy had haughty but handsome features and wore a vermilion dot in the middle of his forehead. His collar, the edges of his sleeves, and the sash around his waist were all embroidered with the sparks amidst snow, white peony. This was the young master that the Lanling Jin clan had sent to be educated in Gusu, Jin Zishuan. Someone else said, "You shouldn't ask Brother Zishuan. He already has a fiancée, so of course he'll say that it's her." When he heard the word fiancée, the corner of Jin Zishuan's mouth seemed to twitch, revealing a not altogether happy expression. However, the disciple who had spoken first was oblivious to the boy's body language, so he laughed and continued questioning. "Really? Which clan's daughter is he engaged to? She must be both spectacularly beautiful and spectacularly talented." Jin Zishuan's eyebrow twitched. "There's no need to continue discussing this," he said. Suddenly, Wei Wuxian said, "What do you mean by 'there's no need to continue'?" The entire classroom looked at him, shocked. Ordinarily, Wei Wuxian was full of smiles and laughter. Even when he was being reprimanded or punished, he was never truly angry. But now, there was a clear wisp of ferocity in his eyes. Zheng Cheng also didn't lash out at Wei Wuxian's troublemaking like he usually did. Instead, he sat by his Shishong's side, his face contorted into a very ugly expression. The words aren't hard to understand, but it is hard to understand what could possibly dissatisfy you about my Shujie. The others whispered among themselves, and after hearing a short explanation, they finally understood what was going on. It turned out the question raised a few moments ago had unintentionally stirred up a hornet's nest, as Jin Zishuan's fiancée was none other than the Yunmeng Zhang clan's Jiang Yanli. Jiang Yanli was Jiang Fengmian's eldest daughter and Zhang Cheng's older sister by blood. She was widely regarded to be mild-mannered with a colorless personality. Her voice was smooth, but her words were lacking in flavor. Her appearance was above average at best, and she had no notable talents. Some were bound to be overshadowed by their peers among the clan of Cultivation, but her fiancé, Jin Zishuan, happened to be her exact opposite. He was the only son of Jin Guangshan's legal wife, and his appearance was enviable, and his talent dazzling. If it had been only a matter of Jiang Yanli's personal qualities, she would have had no hope of marrying him, according to usual customs. Indeed, she barely had the qualifications to compete with other Cultivation family's daughters. Her engagement to Jin Zishuan had come about only due to the relationship between their mothers. Her mother was from the Mei Shen Yu clan, which was allies with Jin Zishuan's mother's clan, and the two women had grown up together and become close friends. The Jin clan had proud, haughty mannerisms, which Jin Zishuan had fully inherited. His vision aimed skyward, and consequently, he had long been unhappy with the engagement. Indeed, not only was he unhappy with his mother's choice of fiancé, he was even more unhappy with the fact that she had arranged his marriage without his permission, and thus his heart rebelled against it all the more. Today, those feelings seized the opportunity to flare up again. "Why don't you ask what about her could make me satisfied?" he said in return. Suddenly, Zheng Cheng rose. Wei Wuxian pushed him away and stepped between them, smiling coldly and saying, "You think you are very satisfactory, as though you have the right to be so picky." Because of this marriage business, Jin Zishuan did not have a high opinion of the Yunmeng Zhang clan, and besides, he couldn't stand the way Wei Wuxian conducted himself. Moreover, he boasted of being unrivaled amongst the younger generation, and had never experienced being treated as though he was so inconsequential. His blood grew hot, and he blurted out, If she's unhappy, then let her break off the engagement. I certainly don't cherish your wonderful Shijie. If you cherish her so much, why don't you take it up with your father? Doesn't he love you more than his own son? After hearing the last sentence, Chang Chang's eyes narrowed, and Wei Wuxian was no longer able to contain his own fury. He flew at Jin Zishuan, his fist raised. Though Jin Zishuan had been prepared to defend himself, he hadn't expected Wei Wuxian to hit back so quickly. The attack started before he had even finished speaking, and when he was struck by the fist, it immediately caused half his face to go numb. He retaliated at once. This fight disturbed the peace of the two great clans. Zhang Fengmian and Jin Guangsheng hardly left Yunmeng and Lanling for Gusu on the very day it occurred. The two clan chiefs met the two rule breakers, both of whom had been forced to kneel as punishment, and then went to Lan Qiren, who criticized them so comprehensively it made them both sweat. After some small talk, Zhang Fengmian brought up his intention to break off the engagement. He told Jin Guangshan, the engagement was originally made at the insistence of Ali's mother. I never agreed with it. Given what happened today, it seems both sides aren't very fond of each other, so it's best not to force the issue. Startled, Jin Guangshan hesitated a bit. Regardless of the situation, ending an engagement with a member of another great clan was never a good thing. What do children understand? He asked. Let them fight. Brother Fengmian, we need not take notice. Brother Jin, Zhang Fengmian replied, though we can help them arrange a marriage, we can't live the marriage for them. In the end, they are the ones who will spend their lives together. This marriage business wasn't Jin Guangshan's idea in the first place either. From the perspective of consolidating power through a marriage alliance, the Yunmeng Zhang clan would not be his first choice, nor was it the best choice. The engagement had happened only because he was perpetually afraid of opposing his wife. But in any case, since the Zhang clan had brought it up of their own accord, and the Jin clan was on the male side of the arrangement, and thus had fewer things to be concerned about, it was not necessary to remain entangled. Besides, he knew Jin Zishuan wasn't happy with having Zhang Yanli as his fiancée. After giving it serious consideration, Jin Guangshan found his backbone, and he agreed. At the time, Wei Wuxian was ignorant of the destruction his fight had reaped. He was kneeling on the stretch of pebble road to which Lan Qiren had assigned him when Zhang Chang walked over from afar and mocked him. You're kneeling so obediently. It's not like you don't know I have to do this all the time. Wei Wuxian's voice was filled with schadenfreude. But this Jin Zishuan guy, there's no way he hasn't been pampered and spoiled rotten since birth. No one's ever forced him to kneel, I'm sure of it. If he doesn't wind up crying for Mummy and Daddy today, I'm not named Wei. Zhang Chang lowered his head a moment and said quietly, Father has come. Has our Shijie come? Wei Wuxian asked. Why would she come? To see you make her lose face? If she was here, wouldn't she have found you and given you medicine? Wei Wuxian sighed and said, if only she had come. It's a good thing you didn't do anything. I was going to, Zhang Chang said. If he hadn't pushed me away, the other side of Jin Zishuan's face would be hideous too. Stop it. His face is uglier for being lopsided, Wei Wuxian said. I heard this Jin Zishuan guy is like a peacock, and he just loves his own appearance. Imagine how he'd feel if he looked in the mirror now. Wei Wuxian beat the ground and laughed, then continued. Actually, I should have let you hit him and just watched from your side. Uncle Zhang might not have come then, but I had no other option. It was intolerable. Zheng Chang grunted, then said softly, "You sure have nice thoughts." Wei Wuxian had said these words idly, but Zheng Chang's inner feelings were a tangled mess. He was well aware that Wei Wuxian's words weren't false. Zhang Fengmian had never rushed to another clan in less than a day because of him. Regardless of whether what happened was big or small, good or bad. Never. When Wei Wuxian saw Zhang Chang's melancholy expression, he thought he was still upset with what Jun Zishuan said. "You should leave," Wei Wuxian said. "You don't need to keep me company any longer. If Lan Wangji comes again, he'll catch you. If you have time, you should find Jun Zishuan and watch his pitiful kneeling." Zhang Chang was somewhat taken aback. "Lan Wangji?" he asked. "What was he doing here? He still has the nerve to come see you again?" "Yeah," Wei Wuxian said. "I think his bravery is laudable if he still has the nerve to come see me. His uncle probably told him to check on me and see if I was kneeling properly." Zhang Chang's instincts were sending him ominous signals. "So were you kneeling properly?" he asked. "I was then," Wei Wuxian replied, "but I waited for him to walk away a bit, then took a tree branch, lowered my head, and dug out a hole in the dirt near me. It's the pile right by your foot. There are ant tunnels there. It took me too much effort to find them. Anyway, I waited for him to turn back and see my shoulders shaking. He had to have thought I was crying, so he came back and asked. You should have seen his face when he caught sight of the ant tunnels." Zheng Chang said, "Why don't you just get the hell out and go back to Yunmeng? I bet he never wants to see you again." Thus, that evening, Wei Wuxian packed up his things, got the hell out, and went back to Yunmeng with Zhang Fengmian.